My daughter looked me in the eye and said I was too broke to be part of her wedding, told me not to make a scene, said I could sit near the back if there was space. I smiled. The next morning, the venue called me to confirm the final payment. That's when I realized she had no idea who really booked it. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. My name is Raymond Holden. I'm 68 years old. I used to work as a postal carrier before I retired 7 years ago. Now I live alone in the same house I helped build with my wife, Judith, 42 years ago, give or take. It's a quiet place, brick on the outside, creaky on the inside, and full of memories that sneak up on you when the floors settle just right at night. Judith passed away 12 years ago. Breast cancer. It came fast, like a thief in the night, and left even faster. Some days I still set 2 plates out by instinct. Other days, I'll laugh at something on TV and turn to share it with her, only to remember. We had one child, a daughter, Claire. And Claire, well, she used to be my shadow. Little thing, all curls and big questions. She'd follow me to the mailbox when she was 5, holding my hand like it was the most important thing in the world. She'd call me Daddy in that sing-song voice and say things like, "When I grow up, I want to marry someone just like you." Funny how life has a way of rewriting the script when you least expect it. These days she calls me Ray. Not Dad, not even Father. Just Ray, like I'm a distant cousin or some old neighbor she tolerates out of politeness. The first time she did it, I thought it was a slip. But after the 3rd or 4th time, I stopped correcting her. I figured it was easier to let go than to hold on to something already half buried. I don't say this for pity. I've had a good life. A full one. I served in the Navy right out of high school. Met Judith at a church picnic in Savannah, 2 weeks after discharge. She was the kind of woman who smiled with her whole face, who believed in coupons, handwritten letters, and dancing barefoot in the kitchen. When Claire was born, Judith said we'd never sleep again, but we never loved anything harder. And she was right. Raising Claire was a full-time job with overtime hours. But I did it. After Judith passed, it was just the 2 of us. I gave up a lot so she didn't have to. Sold the boat, picked up weekend shifts, skipped vacations for years. But none of that felt like sacrifice back then. It felt like duty, like love. Which brings me back to now. I live modestly. Social Security, a small pension, and some savings I don't touch unless necessary. I don't drive much. I make my own coffee. And I still mow my own lawn, though my knees complain about it for 2 days afterward. Claire visits on holidays, or she used to. These days, I mostly see her through filtered Instagram posts. Her, in heels, champagne glass in hand, surrounded by people I've never met. She calls when it's convenient, sends pre-written cards on Father's Day with signatures that look printed. But then she got engaged. She called me one Sunday morning to share the exciting news. Her voice was syrupy sweet, full of buzzwords and Pinterest plans. Rustic chic, she said. Outdoors, string lights, a jazz trio during cocktail hour. I said, "That sounds lovely, sweetheart," she said. "I just knew you'd say that, Ray." Ray. Again. Still, I listened, smiled even. Because no matter how far she drifted, part of me still saw that little girl twirling in a pillowcase veil, asking me to walk her down the aisle someday. But what she said next, that's what changed everything. It was a sentence so simple, so matter-of-fact, that I didn't realize it was a knife until it had already settled between my ribs. "You're too broke to be part of the wedding, Ray." She said it while sipping tea, eyes glued to her phone, as if she were commenting on the weather or an article she'd skimmed. There was no malice in her voice, just calculation, cold, detached, rehearsed. And I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just nodded. I left the cafe quietly, tipped the waitress, said thank you, walked outside and let the wind carry my thoughts. But the truth was, she had no idea. No idea who really paid for that venue she bragged about. No idea what name was on the contract. No idea what was coming next. I woke up the morning after that conversation the same way I always do. No alarm, just the light from the kitchen window filtering through the curtains. My body's been its own clock for years now. I boiled water for coffee, real coffee, not those little pods Claire and her fiancé are so fond of. I used Judith's old stovetop percolator, the one she insisted on keeping even when fancier gadgets came around. Said it made the coffee taste like mornings used to. And I suppose that's why I still use it. The kitchen still looks the way Judith left it. Pale yellow cabinets, little porcelain knobs, a drawer that sticks when it rains. I never remodeled. Couldn't bring myself to paint over the memories. There's an old wooden calendar nailed to the fridge. Every month features a picture of birds. She loved birds. This month, it's a blue jay perched on a pine branch. I flipped the page, circled the 15th. Claire's wedding, or at least what was supposed to be. I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee and looked out the window. The grass needed trimming again. The hydrangeas had come in late this year, probably the frost. Judith used to clip a few and place them in a mason jar on the windowsill. Always said flowers shouldn't be bought when you can grow them yourself. I reached for the photo album, the green one, worn along the edges. Judith labeled it Claire's Little World. Page after page of scraped knees, gap-toothed smiles, birthday parties with dollar store decorations. One photo stuck out. Claire, age 6, standing on my feet in the backyard, pretending I was walking her down the aisle. She'd taken a white pillowcase and tied it to her head like a veil. Her hands clutched a bouquet of weeds she called daisies. She had looked up at me and said, "When I'm a grown-up lady, you'll walk me just like this, Daddy." My heart twisted. Funny how children remember the things that make them feel safe, and how adults forget the very same things when they decide you're no longer useful. I flipped the page. There we were at her high school graduation. I'd saved 3 months to buy her that camera she wanted. She took it to college and never brought it back. I never saw many of those photos. I think they live on her phone now, or some cloud I don't have access to. Judith wasn't there for that graduation. She passed just months before. But Claire wore her mother's locket that day. Said she could feel her with her. That locket's not around her neck anymore, at least not in any of her recent pictures. I don't blame her. The world she lives in now, the tailored dresses, the expensive brunches, the destination bachelorette parties, it has little room for old lockets or postal workers in worn jackets. But back then, the world was just this house and our little family. I remembered Claire crawling into bed the night Judith died. She curled beside me, eyes swollen from crying, and whispered, "Don't go anywhere, Daddy. I only have you now." I kept that promise. Even when the bills piled up and the roof leaked and my back gave out from climbing ladders I had no business being on. I kept going. For her, every tuition check, every unpaid vacation day, every coat I didn't buy so she could have a new one. I did it without keeping score. Because when you love someone that much, it's not about owing. It's about showing. And now she was showing me exactly where I stood in her world. And it wasn't at the altar, not even in the pews. I finished my coffee and rinsed the mug, placed it upside down on the drying rack next to Judith's favorite cup, the one with the chip on the handle and a faded phrase, "Home is where your people are." I guess that's what stings most. when you realize you're no longer someone's people. Still, the house was warm, the sun was rising, and the birds had returned to the feeder out back. They didn't care about wedding invitations or bank accounts or aesthetic. They just showed up. That afternoon, I took a slow walk to the mailbox. The air smelled like earth, thick, humid, but not unpleasant. A storm must have passed through during the night. Inside the box was a single envelope. Edenstone Vineyards, the venue Claire had been raving about. I paused, looked around, felt my chest tighten. I hadn't told her. I never intended to. But 3 months ago, I'd quietly prepaid the deposit for the venue. Used my name on the paperwork. Told the planner it was a surprise. Something a father does when he wants to see his daughter happy, even if he won't get the credit. I hadn't heard from them since. I thought maybe Claire had taken over. But that envelope said otherwise. Back inside, I opened it carefully. Inside was a confirmation notice and a reminder to finalize details and settle the remaining amount by the following Friday. My name, my address, my signature. She never switched it over. She never even asked. And now, the wedding that I was too broke to be part of was only happening because I quietly made it happen. I ran my fingers across the page. For a moment, I felt nothing but stillness. Then, a strange sense of clarity washed over me. Claire didn't know. She didn't care to know. But someone had to remind her. And maybe it was finally time I stopped holding everything together for someone who wouldn't even hold a seat for me. It's strange, looking back, how the first real crack didn't come with a shout or a slammed door. It came with a dress. Or more specifically, a fitting appointment. Claire had called me a few weeks before the cafe incident. She was breathless with excitement, rattling off designers I'd never heard of and talking about the vision she had for the wedding. She said, "Dad, they're doing custom fittings at the shop next Saturday. Everyone's going. Derek's mom, the bridesmaids, even his sister flying in from Chicago. You can come too if you want. They're doing suits at the same time for the fathers." I paused. "You mean for me and Derek's dad?" She hesitated. "Well, actually, we're thinking it might be better for you to just wear something from home. You know, to save costs. We'll reimburse you for the tailoring if you need it. We just want things to look cohesive." Cohesive. I'm not a man who gets easily offended. I've worn the same brown blazer to weddings, funerals, and every church service for the last 15 years. But there was something in the way she said it, the careful wording, the tight tone, like she was trying to protect me from embarrassment, or maybe protect herself from mine. "I see," I said quietly. She filled the silence quickly. "It's not about appearances, really. It's just, you know how these photographers are. Everything has to be on brand." On brand? My daughter, the one who used to beg me to wear matching Halloween costumes, me as a scarecrow, her as a tiny sunflower, was now worried I'd clash with her Instagram feed. I told her I'd pass on the fitting. She didn't argue, just said, "Okay, no worries," and moved on to what kind of wine I thought people liked at weddings. That was the first moment I felt myself become optional. Not in an obvious way, not banished or rejected, just placed in the background, shifted out of focus like an old piece of furniture that no longer matches the new paint. Later that week, I received an email from Claire's fiancé, Derek. It was polite, overly polite. "Hi, Ray. Hope all's well. Quick thing. Claire mentioned you might want to say a few words at the reception. The planning committee talked it over, and we've decided to keep speeches limited to the wedding party. Hope you understand. Should be a tight timeline. Looking forward to seeing you there." The planning committee. Claire had been planning her wedding since she was 10. But now it wasn't just her wedding. It was a brand, a campaign, a curated showcase of someone else's version of perfection. And somehow I didn't fit into that picture. I never asked to speak at the reception, but I had assumed I might be asked. That maybe, just maybe, there'd be a moment to share something about her mother, about who Claire was and where she came from. I didn't reply to Derek's email. I didn't trust myself to. That weekend, I went to the attic and pulled out a box I hadn't opened in years. Inside was a faded envelope tied with ribbon, Judith's vows. She'd written them in ink that had bled at the edges with time. Whatever life gives us, whatever we lose, I will love you in the small ways and the quiet days. I will build a life with you that no one can shake loose. Claire didn't want that kind of love, I realized. She wanted something clean, curated, aesthetic. And people like me, old men with calloused hands and a closet full of off-brand clothes, don't look great in that kind of photo. A few days later, I received a group text from her. Hey all, quick note, Dad will be seated at table 14 near the back, due to spacing. Hope that's okay. No direct call, no warning. Just casually slotted in between an update about the flower arch and which cousin was bringing gluten-free rolls. Table 14. I counted. There were 12 tables reserved for close family. I was after that. I replied, Of course. I'll be wherever there's room. She didn't respond. But her friend, someone I hadn't met, added a heart emoji. A heart. It was then that I realized I wasn't really invited to be part of her day. I was just being managed, like a distant relative who shows up out of obligation, not out of love. That night, I sat in the backyard with a glass of iced tea. The sun was setting behind the old oak tree, the one Claire used to swing from. Judith and I had put up that swing ourselves. I remembered the sound of Claire's laughter echoing through the summer air. The way she used to fall asleep on my chest while we watched fireflies through the screen door. And now I was a name on a table assignment chart. Maybe that's how it goes. Maybe this is the natural course of life. The child outgrows the parent, makes room for someone new. Maybe this is what Judith meant when she said, Don't hold on too tightly to the parts you've already given away. But part of me couldn't shake the feeling that I hadn't just been pushed to the back of the room. I'd been quietly, almost kindly, removed from her life. And soon I would have to decide. Was I going to let them keep rearranging me out of the picture? Or would I finally put down the frame altogether? The betrayal didn't come like thunder. It came like fog. Slowly, quietly, almost gently. The week before the wedding, I received another call from Edenstone Vineyards, the venue. Mr. Holden, just confirming the final payment for the wedding on the 15th. As you've already covered the deposit, the remaining balance of $12,300 is due by Friday. I froze. I hadn't expected that number to be quite so high. $12,000? I cleared my throat. I'm sorry. Can you repeat that? She did, patiently, kindly even. I stared out the kitchen window while she spoke, watching the wind lift the swing under the oak tree. I remembered making that initial payment months ago, a quiet decision made after Judith's favorite song played randomly on the radio. I had thought it was a sign. I wanted to do something for Claire, a final gift from a father who never had the flash or the wealth, but who always showed up. I was under the impression the bride and groom would handle the remaining balance, I said, still trying to keep my voice level. Oh, well, everything is still in your name, Mr. Holden, she said gently. You never transferred the contract, and the automatic payment authorization is tied to your checking account ending in 9372. My heart sank. That account was linked to the small savings Judith and I had put away over decades. Tight grocery budgets, Christmases with handmade gifts, second-hand clothes so Claire could have new ones. Yes, I said. That's mine. Would you like to go ahead and authorize the remaining balance? She asked, cheerful as ever. I told her I'd call back. I hung up, sat down, and didn't move for a long time. When I finally gathered myself, I pulled out my checkbook and bank statements. There it was, a string of small charges from the vineyard over the past 6 weeks. $500 here, $300 there. Nothing big enough to alert me, but enough to chip away at the account Judith had once called our cushion. I called the bank, confirmed the payments, confirmed the automatic draft authorization, signed electronically, by me. Except I never signed anything beyond the initial deposit. And I certainly didn't approve any automatic payments, but someone had access to my online banking, and that someone was Claire. I remembered helping her set up my online banking account a few years back, when she said she wanted to make sure you're protected, Dad. I had trusted her with my password. She even downloaded the app for me. I felt like a fool. I stared at the account balance, barely enough left for the air conditioner repair I'd been putting off for 2 summers. The truth settled in quietly. She didn't just want me out of the wedding. She wanted my wallet in the wedding, without my knowledge, without my permission. And that was the part that stunned me. Because this wasn't an oversight. This wasn't a miscommunication. This was a choice. Claire had deliberately kept the contract in my name, had allowed the venue to continue billing me, had ignored the financial burden she knew I couldn't carry without consequences. And she'd done it all while smiling, texting heart emojis, and asking me to wear something neutral. She had erased me publicly, seating me at table 14, canceling my speech, minimizing my presence. But privately, she'd kept me exactly where she needed me, as the invisible sponsor, the one who footed the bill and stayed quiet. My hands shook, not with rage, but with something heavier, grief. This wasn't about money, not really. It was about how easily someone you love can see you as a tool. And worse, how quietly they can justify it. I stood up, walked to the living room, and stared at Judith's photo on the mantel. Would you have seen it? I asked her image softly. Would you have known sooner? She stared back at me with that soft, unfailing smile. I thought about all the things I had told Claire over the years. Always be honest, even when it's hard. Don't forget where you come from. Money will buy you a day, but respect will carry you a lifetime. And yet, here I was, disrespected, used, discarded. I sat back down at the kitchen table, pulled out the Edenstone contract, and read every line carefully. Claire didn't know she'd left the power in my hands. She thought I was old, sentimental, disconnected. She thought I wouldn't notice. But she was wrong. And if this wedding was built on my name and my bank account, then she'd better be ready to find out what happens when that name disappears. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table, Judith's old shawl draped across my shoulders, not for warmth, but for comfort. The kind of comfort that only lives in fabric that remembers the hands that made it. The silence in the house was thick. No clocks ticking, no hum of television. Just the old wooden bones of the house creaking as if it too was unsettled by the truth. I kept staring at the numbers on the paper. The balance due, the dates, the signatures. They didn't lie. Claire had used me, used my account, used my name, and I hadn't seen it coming. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was hollow. It's a strange kind of pain, being betrayed by the one person you thought would never forget what you've done for them. I didn't need thanks. I never asked for it. But I never imagined she'd quietly take what wasn't hers and then tell me to sit in the back row like some barely invited stranger. She knew what that account meant. She knew it was the fund Judith and I had built. Every month we put something away, at first for college, then for emergencies, then just to have a little safety net. Judith had called it our promise money, a promise that we'd never be helpless, that we'd always have something to fall back on. And now that account was almost empty. I stood and walked to the closet, reached to the top shelf and pulled down a shoebox labeled Claire's cards. Judith had saved every note Claire had ever given us. Birthday drawings, Mother's Day stick figures, hand-scrawled "I'm sorry" letters from her teenage years. I sifted through them slowly, my fingers running over each one as if I could touch the past. One stood out, a card from when Claire was 11, folded crookedly, with glitter glue hearts and the words in shaky pencil. To my best daddy in the world. Thank you for always making me feel safe. I want to be just like you when I grow up. I traced the sentence over and over again until the words blurred. Where had that little girl gone? Had I been so focused on protecting her future that I failed to see the kind of person she was becoming? I remembered Judith's voice on the last night she was strong enough to talk. She had taken my hand and whispered, "Ray, don't lose yourself trying to save her from every bruise. Let her fall sometimes. Let her learn." I hadn't listened. I'd made her world too soft. I covered every crack, paid every bill, hid every hard truth. And now she thought she could take and take and take, and I'd never push back. That I was too soft, too old, too tired to stand up. I put the card back in the box, placed it on the coffee table, and turned off the lamp. The next morning, I walked to the post office. Mary, the clerk, looked up and smiled. "Ray, you're early today." "Couldn't sleep," I said. I bought a book of stamps I didn't need. I wasn't sure why. Habit, maybe. On the way home, I passed a neighbor's yard. A little boy, maybe 7 or 8, was trying to ride a bike without training wheels. He kept falling. His father stayed beside him, steady hands, quiet encouragement. I smiled at the scene, then felt a sharp pain in my chest. That had been me. Once. The father in the yard. The steady presence. The fixer. But what happens when the fixer breaks? I made it home, sat down in the living room, and stared at the blank television screen. The silence grew heavy again, like a second skin. Around noon, the phone rang. It was Claire. I let it ring once, twice, then answered. "Hey, Dad," she chirped. Her voice sounded bright, pleased, like nothing was wrong. "I just wanted to say thank you. I talked to the venue, and it looks like everything's on track. Someone must have taken care of the final payments already. I wasn't sure, but I figured it was you." She laughed lightly. "You're always surprising me." I said nothing. "I mean, obviously I would have handled it," she went on. "But with everything going on, it just slipped through the cracks. But that's you, right? Always one step ahead." Still, I didn't speak. "Anyway, you're amazing. I know I've been a little distant, but I just wanted to say I appreciate it, okay?" I swallowed hard, and then I said, "Glad it's all taken care of." She paused. "Yeah, me too." "Okay, I've got to run. Dress fitting. Love you." She hung up before I could respond. She didn't ask how I was, didn't ask if it strained me, didn't ask anything, just assumed I'd keep giving, that I'd keep absorbing every cut with a smile. But something inside me had shifted, not out of bitterness, out of clarity. Claire thought I was broke. She had no idea the real wealth I held wasn't in a bank account. It was in the lessons I'd learned, the quiet strength Judith taught me, and the resolve I was now building with every breath. They say the heart has rooms. That day, I locked the door to the one where Claire lived. I didn't throw away the key, but I put it far enough away that she'd have to work, to earn her way back in. And as I sat back down and stared at the checkbook, I said one thing aloud. Not this time. I've heard people say that being a parent means giving up your own life so someone else can live theirs better. I didn't just give up mine. I handed it over piece by piece without keeping track. Until now. After that call from Claire, I sat down in the garage and opened a rusted green filing cabinet I hadn't touched in years. It creaked like an old friend with tired knees. Inside were files marked taxes, medical, and Claire. The Claire folder was thick, overstuffed and fraying at the seams. I pulled it out, wiped the dust from the label, and carried it to the kitchen table like a relic. And then, one by one, I started pulling out the pages of my past. There was the daycare receipt from when Judith first got sick. $180 a week, back when my paycheck was just enough to pay the mortgage and keep the lights on. Then came the hospital bills, Judith's treatments, the appointments we hoped would fix her. I had taken a second job delivering groceries at night while Claire slept on the couch beside Judith, holding her mother's hand like a child trying to stop time. I found the tuition invoice from Claire's first semester at university, $6,240. I remembered staring at that number, wondering if I'd have to sell my pickup truck. I did. She never knew that. There was the pink slip from the 1979 Ford I loved. The same truck that took us on family picnics, beach trips, and late-night drives when Claire couldn't sleep as a baby. I sold it to a neighbor who still drives it around town. I took the bus to work for 2 years after that. Rain, snow, blistering heat. Never complained. Because Claire had dreams, and I had obligations. Then there were the college dorm deposits, study abroad fundraisers, laptop receipts, and grocery wire transfers when she forgot to budget correctly. I never said no, even when I wanted to, even when I should have. I found a small envelope at the very bottom of the folder. Inside was a drawing. Claire had made it in second grade. It showed me standing in front of a house, holding hands with a stick-figure girl and a woman with yellow hair. Above it was scrawled in crooked letters, "My dad is my hero. He makes the house warm." I held that paper in my hands for a long time. I could feel Judith in it, her warmth, her presence. She had always reminded me why we do what we do, why we sacrifice. Not for applause, she used to say, but for legacy. Claire had forgotten that, or maybe I'd failed to remind her. I thought about the time Judith and I skipped our 10th anniversary trip because Claire needed braces. We canceled the cruise, smiled through it, and ate dinner on our porch with candles from the dollar store. She called it our home cruise, said the stars were better than anything at sea. I thought about when Claire's prom dress got ruined the day before the dance. Judith was already gone by then. Claire sobbed for hours. I stayed up until 2 a.m, sewing rhinestones and lace onto a department store clearance gown, until it looked like something off a magazine cover. She called me a magician, said, "Mom would be proud of you." I thought about every parent-teacher meeting I went to alone, every lunch I packed, every night I stayed awake until she got home, even when she stopped saying goodnight. Every sacrifice had been worth it, because I loved her, because Judith had asked me to love her enough for both of us. But love, real love, doesn't excuse betrayal. It doesn't mean being used. It doesn't mean being erased. And it certainly doesn't mean funding a wedding for a child who can't even say your name without shame. Ray. That's what she calls me now. 3 letters that sound like distance. But I remember when she used to sing Daddy down the hallway, like it was her favorite song. I remember when she ran to me with skinned knees and open arms. When she asked me to braid her hair because Mommy showed you how. I remember everything. And that's what makes this harder. Because I don't hate her. I just can't recognize her anymore. The little girl I raised wouldn't have stolen from me, wouldn't have told me I wasn't good enough to stand by her on the most important day of her life. The woman she's become. I'm not sure she'd even recognize the man who made her life possible. But that was about to change. Not through yelling, not through guilt, but through truth, through consequence, through action, because I hadn't just sacrificed for her. I had built the very foundation she now walks on. And maybe it was time she felt the ground shake just enough to remember who laid the bricks. I didn't decide to act out of revenge. I decided to act because for the first time in my life, I saw my daughter for who she had become and who she no longer saw me as. That was the turning point. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't even about the wedding. It was about dignity. Mine. Judith always said that dignity doesn't come from how others treat you. It comes from what you refuse to accept. And sitting there with the open file of every sacrifice I'd made, every receipt of love and loyalty, I realized what I was accepting. I was accepting being erased. And I couldn't do that anymore. The next morning I made a list, not in anger, just a clean, neat column of facts. Venue still in my name. Contract legally binding only through my signature. Payments made from my account without authorization. No verbal or written request to transfer ownership. No acknowledgement or gratitude for financial support. It was all so deliberate. And yet she thought I wouldn't notice. Or maybe she just hoped I wouldn't. That afternoon, I pulled out the original Edenstone contract and reread every clause. I underlined 2 sentences in red. The individual listed as contract holder may cancel the event at any time prior to final payment deadline. Full refund available if cancellation occurs more than 7 days before the event. 7 days. I had 7 days left. I sat back, folded my hands, and let the silence answer the only question left. Was I ready to do this? Was I ready to pull the rug from under a wedding that bore my name and drained my account, but didn't want my presence? I thought about Judith. What would she say? I imagined her standing in the doorway, arms folded, one eyebrow raised. You raised her to stand tall, Ray, but she's standing on you. And then, in a softer voice, she needs to learn what it means to fall and get back up on her own. That settled it. The decision wasn't born from bitterness. It was born from clarity. That night, I sat in the garden with a pad of paper and wrote a letter. Not to send, just to write. Claire, you were born on a Wednesday afternoon in a storm so loud the nurses had to yell over thunder. Your mother cried when she held you. I just stared. I'd never seen something so small demand so much space in a room. I've watched you grow, stumble, shine. I've protected you from pain, even the kind you needed to feel. That was my mistake. I made your life soft. I made your road smooth. I made it so you didn't have to look back. But now you've stepped so far ahead that you've forgotten the man behind you. So I'm stepping off the path. I'm stepping out of the picture. Not because I don't love you, but because I finally love myself enough to stop being used. I folded the letter, tucked it into my coat pocket, and went inside. The next day I called Edenstone Vineyards. The woman who answered remembered me. Mr. Holden, everything going well on your end? Actually, I said calmly, I need to cancel the event. There was a pause. Then, oh my. The whole event? Yes, under the clause we discussed months ago. She confirmed the details. I provided my ID over the portal, signed the cancellation form electronically. And just like that, the venue was no longer theirs. It was no longer mine either. It was done. She sounded concerned. Is everything all right, Mr. Holden? "I'm fine," I said. "Just finally awake." By the next morning, the refund hit my account. It wasn't the full amount. I'd still eaten the non-refundable initial fees. But I didn't care. Money could be replaced. My sense of self. That was harder to rebuild. But I was starting. I didn't tell Claire. Not yet. I knew she'd find out. And when she did, I wanted it to be after the dust had settled. After she'd learned what it meant to lose something she thought was guaranteed. She'd never thanked me. Not for the deposit. Not for the venue. Not for a single dollar. But maybe she'd remember who made it possible when she stood in the canceled courtyard with nowhere to walk down the aisle. I wasn't angry. I wasn't vindictive. I was free. For the first time in years, I felt the heaviness lifted. The expectation dissolved. The need to be needed. Gone. I sat in the backyard that evening, hands in the dirt, planting tomatoes. Something Judith and I used to do together every spring. And I thought to myself, let her plant her own seeds now. Let her water them. Watch them bloom or wither. That's how we learn. That's how we grow. And if she ever finds her way back here, to this house, to this garden, to the man she used to call Daddy, I'll be here, but I won't be standing behind her anymore. I'll be standing beside myself. The thing about quiet revenge is that it doesn't come with raised voices or slamming doors. It comes with signatures, timestamps, and proof. And I had all three. After canceling the venue, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt still. There was no dramatic music, no vindication. Just a deep exhale that felt like it had been stuck in my chest for years. But I wasn't finished yet. Claire hadn't just assumed I'd pay. She'd accessed my online bank account, authorized repeated charges, and hidden it behind silence. That wasn't just betrayal. That was fraud. I wasn't looking to destroy her life. But I wasn't about to let her believe she could walk over mine without consequence. So I made one more call. "Hey, Jim, it's Ray Holden. You still doing consultation work?" Jim Carter had been a friend of mine for 40 years, former attorney now semi-retired. We'd shared shifts at the post office and bonded over a love for fishing and the Atlanta Braves. He was the kind of man who told you the truth, even when it hurt. "Always for you, Ray," he said. "What's going on?" I told him everything. Not the emotional parts, just the facts. The unauthorized bank access, the continuous venue charges, the forged signature on the auto payment authorization. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, he said, "You have grounds." "More than grounds." "Not pressing. Charges," I replied. He nodded. "Then what are you doing?" "I just want her to see it, feel it. Know what it means to cross a line you never should have touched." He leaned back in his chair and grinned. "Then we build a wall, quietly, legally, one she can't climb." Over the next 2 days, we put together everything. Bank statements, Logan timestamps, copies of authorization logs, the original contract, screenshots of the emails confirming my name and bank were being used. Everything dated, backed up, and secured in both paper and digital form. Jim helped me draft a formal letter, not a threat, but a record, a ledger of what she had done, a documentation of her choices. At the top, it read, "This is not a legal claim. This is a father setting the record straight." We included the full refund invoice from the venue and the cancellation confirmation. Then at the end, we added, "Please be aware, this letter serves not as an accusation, but as a mirror. What you see reflected in it depends on the kind of woman you choose to be." I sealed it in an envelope. Didn't send it right away. Instead, I turned to the other part of my plan. One Claire would feel before she ever opened that envelope. I contacted the photographer, the caterer, the jazz trio. One by one, I asked for clarification on who signed their agreements and how payments were being handled. And one by one, they told me the same thing. Everything was going through you, Mr. Holden. Not Claire, not Derek, me. The whole wedding was a tower built on my name, and Claire never imagined I'd pull my name out from the foundation. I called each vendor calmly, respectfully, and withdrew. Every agreement tied to me was voided, every payment frozen, every invoice redirected to Claire directly. One caterer tried to protest. Mr. Holden, this is very short notice. We've already begun preparation. And I understand that, I replied. I'll pay the cancellation fee. I won't leave you hanging, but I'm no longer associated with this event. Once they realized I wasn't bluffing, they backed off. By the end of the week, I'd unraveled it all. Not out of pettiness, out of principle. If she wanted a wedding without her father, she'd have to pay for it without her father. I left the letter with Jim, just in case. Told him to mail it only if she came knocking with anger instead of apology. Then I packed a small bag, booked a room at a quiet lodge 2 towns over, and left the morning before the wedding. No forwarding address, no texts, no "I'm sorry, but" explanations. I was gone. She wouldn't know where I went. She wouldn't hear my voice in the crowd. There'd be no Ray in table 14, only the echo of the choices she made. The next morning, as I sipped coffee on the porch of that little lodge, the sky pale and the air crisp, my phone buzzed. Claire. I didn't answer. Another buzz. Then another. By noon, 5 missed calls. A message came. Through. Dad, the venue canceled everything. What's going on? They said the contract was yours. The photographer, too. And the food. What happened? Did you do this? I set the phone face down. She was scrambling now. She was realizing that what she thought was hers had only been borrowed. And not with permission. And I was finally out of reach. Out of service. Out of debt. Out of that role she had boxed me into so tightly. I forgot I had a name of my own. Raymond Holden. Not just her father. A man who remembered his worth. I came home the evening after what should have been the wedding. The house was still, just as I had left it. The curtains swayed slightly in the breeze, and the porch smelled faintly of cut grass. But the stillness didn't last. The doorbell rang before I'd even finished setting my bag down. 3 sharp presses, not frantic, but urgent. I opened it to find Claire, tear-streaked, red in the face, hair pinned back sloppily, like she'd gotten halfway through fixing it before the world cracked beneath her heels. "What did you do?" she asked, voice trembling, not from grief, but fury barely contained. I didn't invite her in. I just stepped outside, closing the screen door behind me. "Claire," I said simply. "You canceled everything," she snapped. "You pulled out the venue, the caterer. The whole thing collapsed." I said nothing. Just looked at her. Let her fill the silence. She did. "They said the contract was in your name, and I didn't. Dad, how could you do this to me? Do you have any idea how this makes me look?" There it was. Not how could you hurt me, not why didn't you talk to me, but how could you embarrass me? "You didn't think I'd notice?" I asked quietly. "Thousands coming out of my account without a word?" She folded her arms, blinking fast. "I didn't think it mattered. You were the one who paid the deposit, and everything was still under your name. I figured. You figured I'd keep paying." Claire hesitated. "I figured you wanted to. You always do. You always handle things." "No," I corrected. "I always used to." She flinched. I stepped down one stair, folding my hands in front of me. My voice never rose. It didn't need to. "You told me I was too broke to be part of your wedding," I said. "You didn't want me in the front, didn't want me in the photos. didn't want me to speak. That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant. You wanted my silence, my distance, and my money. She looked away. You're twisting this. No, I said gently. You did. She opened her mouth to speak, then stopped. Her eyes searched my face, maybe for some softness, some crack in the armor, but she only found calm steel. I didn't think you'd cancel everything, she whispered. I didn't think you'd actually go through with it. I nodded slowly. Because you thought I was weak. She went, quiet, and maybe I was, I added. For a long time, I thought love meant saying yes, that if I gave enough, you'd remember where you came from. But I raised a daughter who learned how to take, not how to stand. Claire bit her lip, eyes starting to well up again. Derek's family is furious. They said this makes us look like people who built a wedding on a lie, I asked. She swallowed hard. I didn't mean to steal. I just thought you wouldn't mind. I leaned against the railing. Claire, that is the problem. You didn't ask. You didn't check. You didn't care. She stood in silence, her arms hanging limp now, her anger dissolving into something else. Regret? Embarrassment? I couldn't tell, and I didn't press. I left something with Jim Carter, I said. A letter with bank statements, screenshots, contract records, not for court, just for clarity. Her eyes widened. If you'd shown up here screaming, threatening lawyers, he would have mailed it to you and your fiancé. But you came yourself. That tells me a sliver of the old Claire might still be in there. She took a step back. So, what now? That's up to you, I said. You can spin this. You can blame me. You can say it was sabotage. Or you can tell the truth. She wiped her eyes. And what's the truth? That your father gave until it broke him. And when he stood up, you finally saw how small you'd made him. The wind moved between us. No apology came, but no more lies either. She nodded, just once, and walked back to her car. No hug, no final words, just the quiet sound of her heels on gravel and the click of the door shutting behind her. She didn't look back, and I didn't call after her. I stood on the porch as her car disappeared down the road, hands in my pockets, heart surprisingly steady. The confrontation didn't end in forgiveness, but it ended in truth. And sometimes that's the best you can hope for. I thought that would be the end of it. Claire walked away and I let her go. I had no interest in revenge beyond what had already unfolded. But life has a way of finishing what pride refuses to admit. 2 days after our conversation on the porch, I got a call from the florist. She sounded nervous. Mr. Holden, we're calling to confirm cancellation, though it's a bit irregular at this stage. I canceled nothing, I said. The bride or groom must have. She hesitated. Actually, that's why I'm calling. Claire said to charge everything to your card on file to keep things moving. When the payment failed, she accused us of backing out. My silence must have said enough. The florist sighed. I'm sorry, sir. We're just trying to avoid getting dragged into family disputes. But we have emails, screenshots. I thanked her, hung up, and shook my head. Claire was trying to patch the wedding back together, using the one card that was no longer hers to use, mine. I had removed it from the online accounts 2 days ago. She must have tried anyway, assuming no one would double-check. But they had, and worse for her, the florist wasn't the only one. By the end of the day, I had 3 voicemails from vendors, each echoing the same concern. Mr. Holden, we've had a very uncomfortable call with Claire. She claims you're refusing payment for services you originally agreed to. We wanted to clarify before taking any action. I responded the same way each time. I never agreed to anything past the deposit, and that contract was legally terminated. And then I added each time firmly, "If you'd like documentation, I can provide it." I sent the cancellation forms, timestamps, bank records, and just like that, the narrative started to crack. The next morning, I got a knock on the door. Jim Carter again, holding an envelope. "I figured you'd want to see this," he said, handing it over. "It's been making rounds." Inside was a printed-out screenshot of a Facebook post from Derek's mother. "Wedding canceled due to unforeseen financial issues caused by the bride's family. Extremely disappointed. More soon." A few comments down, someone had already chimed in. "Thought her dad paid for everything? Didn't she say it was already fully covered? Ouch, that's messy." And beneath that, a photo. Claire, 2 weeks earlier, holding up a wine glass, captioned, "Venue booked, everything perfect. Grateful for the best dad in the world." Jim folded his arms. "She tried to use your generosity as social currency. That's what makes this one sting." He wasn't wrong. It wasn't just betrayal behind closed doors. It was Claire painting a public image of herself as a gracious bride, with a father who made it all happen. Meanwhile, she was locking me out of the guest list and draining my account in the background. But now, the mask had cracked. The vendors knew. The friends were whispering. Derek's family, cold, pristine people who barely looked at me when we met, had started asking questions. According to a message forwarded to me by a neighbor's niece, small-town grapevine always alive, Claire and Derek had postponed the wedding indefinitely. No venue, no backup location. Photographer and caterer pulled out entirely. And the jazz trio? Turned out one of them was married to the florist's assistant. Let's just say word travels. There wasn't a public announcement, not yet. But I could feel it. A quiet shame moving like a fog around them. People may not have known everything, but they knew enough. Enough to understand that the story didn't add up. Later that evening, I received a message from an unknown number. It was short. "You could have just said no. You didn't have to humiliate me. Claire." I stared at it for a long time. She still didn't see. This wasn't about humiliation. This was about accountability. Something I had protected her from for far too long. I didn't reply. Instead, I walked outside, sat on the porch, and watched the sun bleed orange across the sky. And for the first time in years, I felt peace. No more hiding. No more second-guessing. No more trying to prove my worth to someone who had forgotten where she came from. Let her live with her choices. Let her explain it to Derek, to his family, to her own reflection. I had nothing left to give her, but I still had everything I needed. My name, my home, and my dignity. She had tried to bury me beneath her celebration. But I rose, and now she was the one left standing in the wreckage, holding the pieces of a wedding built on illusion. A week passed, then 2. No more messages from Claire, no more angry vendors, no surprise visits or attempts at explanations, just silence. And in that silence, I found something I hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. The garden had started to bloom again. The tomatoes I planted just before the wedding sprouted small green bulbs. The hydrangeas were coming in full this season. Judith would have smiled at that. She always said they looked best when the soil was a little acidic. I never knew what that meant, but I followed her instructions anyway. Each morning, I sipped my coffee on the porch in peace. No looming payment notices, no overdrafts, no pretense, and no more waiting for my daughter to treat me like family. She hadn't called since that final message, the one where she claimed I had humiliated her. But I think deep down, she knew the truth. I hadn't humiliated her. She had, with her silence, with her entitled smile, with her hands in my wallet while her words pushed me out of her life. And when she got caught in the light, when the foundation I had quietly built crumbled beneath her feet, she couldn't bear to admit who built it in the first place. But I wasn't bitter. I was tired, but not bitter. I had loved Claire more than anything. I still did in a way. But love doesn't mean stepping back into the fire after you finally stop burning. One afternoon, I pulled out the last letter Judith ever wrote. I kept it in a little wooden box beside our bed. It was yellowing at the edges, but her handwriting, careful, elegant, full of strength, remained. Ray, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you're probably trying to do too much again. You've always believed in carrying everyone else's weight, but don't forget that you deserve lightness too. Claire will need you, but don't mistake needing you for loving you, and if the time comes where those two things fall apart, I hope you choose yourself. I folded the letter back up with careful hands. Judith had known. Even in death, she'd seen the path ahead more clearly than I had. And now I was finally choosing myself. I didn't block Claire's number. I didn't delete the photos or burn her childhood letters. I wasn't angry, but I was done giving parts of myself to someone who didn't even remember the shape of my love. One evening, I saw Derek's parents at the grocery store. They nodded politely, but didn't speak. I didn't mind. The community already knew something had gone wrong. They were just piecing together the how and the why. I didn't offer any answers. I didn't need to. Let them guess. Let the silence speak louder than gossip ever could. A few days later, I saw something strange. Claire's car pulled up outside the house. She didn't get out. She just sat there, engine running, eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses. From the porch, I could barely see her face, but I knew that silhouette by heart. She stayed there for 5 minutes, maybe 10, then drove away. No knock, no apology, no explanation, and somehow that made the closure feel real. She was near enough to touch, but chose not to. That's what her choices had become. The distance between us. I didn't chase her down the driveway. I didn't wave or call out. I just turned and went inside. I stood in the hallway for a long time, surrounded by old pictures. Claire as a toddler in Judith's arms. Claire in her graduation cap. Claire sitting on my shoulders at the county fair, cotton candy stuck to her cheeks. I'd been a good father. Maybe not perfect, but steady, present, loving, and I was done trying to prove that to anyone else. I took down the wedding invitation still pinned to the fridge. It was beautiful. Elegant script, gold foil edges. A little quote about love printed beneath their names. Love is composed of a single soul inhabiting 2 bodies. I smiled faintly. They'd need a little more than Aristotle to fix what they broke. I folded the invitation, not with anger, but with intention, and placed it in the file folder labeled Claire. It joined every school drawing, report card, and college tuition receipt. Because history doesn't stop just because the relationship changes. And I would always remember, not with bitterness, but with boundaries. That night, I sat on the porch with a glass of sweet tea. The moon was high and the wind soft. I thought about Judith. I hoped she'd be proud of how I handled it. Not because I made noise, but because I walked away with dignity. And for once I wasn't standing in the background. I was exactly where I belonged. In my own life. In peace. It's been almost a year now. The tomatoes I planted that spring turned out beautifully. I shared them with the neighbors. Even canned some. Judith would have been proud. She always said, "Nothing you grow yourself is ever wasted." I've grown more than vegetables since then. I've grown into myself again, into the space I'd once shrunk to keep everyone else comfortable. Claire hasn't called, not once. And still, I don't hate her. There's a difference between closing a door and burning down the whole house. I left the porch light on, figuratively speaking, but I never walked back out to the driveway to wait for her. I didn't chase, didn't beg. Some lessons can't be taught by holding someone's hand. They have to be learned by walking alone. Word around town is Claire and Derek never rescheduled the wedding. The engagement fizzled quietly. One day, his last name disappeared from her Facebook page, then the photos, then her profile altogether. Someone said she moved to a smaller apartment in the city. Another neighbor claimed they saw her driving an older car, looking tired, worn down in a way that had nothing to do with makeup or money. I don't celebrate that. But I do acknowledge it. Actions carry weight, and sometimes when you've built a life on borrowed ground, the foundation eventually gives way. One Sunday, I found a letter in the mailbox. No return address, just my name, written in a handwriting I hadn't seen since she was a teenager. Inside was a single-page note. Dad. I didn't know how much I had until I lost it. I didn't know what you were carrying until it dropped. And I didn't know how much you loved me until you stopped letting me use it as a shield. I'm sorry. I don't expect you to write back. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. All of it. And I miss you. Love, Claire. I sat on the porch with that letter for a long time. I didn't cry, not because it didn't hurt, but because it didn't need tears anymore. It had already been grieved. I folded the letter, placed it in the same folder with the rest of her history. That file now held a full life, from her first crayon drawing to her first adult reckoning. I didn't write back, not because I was cruel, but because sometimes silence is the space someone needs to grow. Let her sit in it. Let her earn her way back with presence, not promises. A few weeks later, I passed her old high school on my way into town. The gates were open for a charity event. Balloons, folding chairs, someone grilling hot dogs under a blue canopy. I didn't stop, but I did glance at the playground, the same one where I once pushed Claire on a swing until she screamed from laughing too hard. That day, her arms had stretched wide to the sky, and she yelled, "Higher, Daddy, don't let go." And I hadn't. I had held on too long, maybe, believing she'd remember how tightly I'd gripped the ropes. But people forget, especially when you never let them feel the fall. Now she had, and she was still standing, maybe not polished, maybe not celebrated, but changed. And me? I was still here, still the same man Judith married, still the same father who stayed through every scraped knee, every college meltdown, every graduation where I stood in the back just to see her smile. But now I was something else too. I was whole, not because I got her back, but because I got me back. That fall, I decided to host a backyard barbecue. Nothing big, just a few neighbors, some friends from the post office. Mary from the corner store brought her famous peach cobbler. Carter brought ribs and a deck of cards. We ate under string lights, the kind Judith used to hang every summer. We laughed, played music, told stories from our working days. And as the night wore on, someone asked, "Ray, you ever think about moving? This place must be filled with old memories." I looked around, at the porch, at the hydrangeas, at the swing, and I smiled. "It is," I said, "but not all memories hurt." They nodded. We raised our glasses, and in the quiet between the music and the laughter, I felt something full and steady in my chest. A life rebuilt, not around someone else's needs, but around my own strength, my own peace, my own roots. Let her find hers. Maybe one day we'll meet again, not as father and daughter lost in a storm of guilt and silence, but as two people who finally learned how to stand without taking from the other. Until then, The porch light stays on, but I'll be inside, whole, quiet, free.